move into our main event here. Ken Donnelly, our speaker today, is the president of Beyond Attitude Consulting, Inc., an international consulting firm headquartered in Nova Scotia, Canada. Ken has been working with government and non-governmental organizations on sustainability issues for over 30 years. Ken specializes in nurturing sustainable behaviors. He is an international speaker and trainer and publisher of a weekly newsletter distributed around the world. For the past 10 years, Ken has worked with clients in Canada and the USA to help stop the spread of invasive species. The approach is to improve prevention programs through the application of behavioral psychology to change human behavior and improve systems. Ken, I am so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being with us. I am going to bow out and let you share your screen and take it away. Thank you so much. And just for our participants, please enter any questions you have in the Q&A. And after the presentation, I'll bring those questions to Ken and we can get some answers out there. So just go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get those to those after the presentation. Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you confirm that it's the proper screen? We already checked this beforehand, but
yes, I'm seeing the presentation mode. So if you could swap displays again.
It's a good thing I check, you know. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you everyone for coming today. As Elizabeth says, I'm going to be talking about jumping over the barriers to preventing the spread of invasive species. And just a couple of things to sort of mention at the beginning here. And one is that, you know, when I'm doing my workshops, and I always start with this and talking about the gap between people's attitudes and awareness and the actual behaviors, whether it's the American or Canadian spelling, that we want them to undertake. And I often use the example of blood donation. Even though most people, almost 100% of people, think blood donation is really important and they know all of the benefits, only 3.8% of Americans donate blood, and here in Canada it's 3.5%. Now, you know, it's only about 40% of Americans are eligible to give blood, and in Canada it's about 50%. But still, even though they have the intent of giving blood, only about 1 in 10 that are eligible actually do it. So that's such a prevalent thing. You know, it's not just blood donation. It can be, you know, people know that they should exercise more, that they don't, that they should eat less perhaps, and they don't. And there's all kinds of different ones, different gaps between attitudes and awareness and behavior. So it's important to keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, that there is that gap. And as I say, you know, psychologists call that the intention behavioral gap because it's such a real thing. They've given a name to it. So the other thing that we should keep in mind is this innovation adoption curve. Whenever somebody introduces either a new product or a new program, and for people like us, when we're promoting a new behavior, we have to understand the innovation adoption curve. And this curve in the green bit underneath that bell curve is the total population. Now that could be the total population of the United States or a city or a state, or all of the anglers that you're talking to, or all of the pond enthusiasts, that kind of thing. So whatever the population is. And going from left to right, we have the people that are easier to get on board with our new behavior on the left-hand side. So the ones that start right away are the innovators, that as soon as you say, you know, you should turn down your thermostat at night because you're, that'll help reduce energy, all the energy efficiency people will go, yes, you're right, I'm going to do that right away. So those are the innovators, and the early adopters will be the people that will come along as soon as they start hearing the messaging, and they'll change their behaviors. After that, it gets a little bit harder to get other people involved. The next group is called the early majority. And those people, if you do things like get them to give you a commitment in order to change their behavior. You give them the information because maybe they're not as knowledgeable about the topic as innovators and early adopters. Then you can start getting that early majority involved in the new behavior that you're trying to foster. And then when you get them on board, you're at about a 50% of the population, and that's really the tipping point. And you start going down that curve, and it's kind of like skiing. It's a little easier going down there, meaning that it's tougher to get those people on board. However, you start getting things like peer pressure that are working for you because they're looking around them and they're seeing other people are performing this behavior and they think they should as well. So a really good example of that is recycling. When recycling programs first started, some people were putting out the recycling at the curb for collection. And the more and more people did it, finally, those people who really might not have even believed in recycling so much started to feel a bit of shame because everybody else was doing it. They're feeling the peer pressure and they start doing it too. So that's when social norms start working for you and those people come on board. And then finally, the laggards are those that, you know, some of them you may never get involved in the program. You may never get them to change their behavior, or some it may just take a very long time. And you know, when we're developing behavior change programs and we're implementing them, it's really important to understand that you're not going to get everybody to change their behavior over a summer, for instance. And so starting a program, say at the beginning of the summer with some summer students, and evaluating at the end of that first summer, which is, you know, maybe 3 months later, you're not going to be able to have changed everybody's behavior. We're in this for the long haul, and that's an important part of understanding evaluation of these programs. So with that, the attitude and the awareness gap between attitude and awareness and behavior and the innovation adoption curve, I want to talk about a program that we've been working with. I've been working with my colleagues at Azentive out of California, and we've been working with Minnesota DNR, having a great time working with those wonderful people, by the way. And we started this project that I'm going to use as an example, sort of to illustrate the steps here, in 2018 with phase 1 research. And the research that we were doing included literature reviews and expert panels and surveys. And I'm going to talk more about that soon. And we're at the stage that this summer that there's pilot projects that are running based on the behaviors that we evaluated and came up with. So I'm going to take you through the process that we used, sort of at a granular level, but still somewhat high level. But the really good thing is that if you take your phone and you click on that, phone and take a picture, or aim it rather, the photo app at that QR code, you can do it now, or you can do it at the end. I have this thing at the end of the presentation as well. I'll pop it up on the screen, but that will take you to a website that Minnesota DNR have created, and it has all of the reports and all of the work that we've done so far on this project. And you can get it all, you can download it, you can read it there. A tremendous resource. So let's move on here. The 5 steps that we've done with this program is, the first thing we did was identify potential behaviors, and that we wanted to evaluate as potential behaviors for promotion. Then we evaluated them and then chose the best ones from that evaluation. We built capacity in order to deliver across the state. And as I said, now there's some pilot test approaches that are going on. So I'm going to walk you through those steps. But you can see in that first step, we actually identified over 150 potential behaviors. And how did we do that? Well, first of all, we looked at, we consolidated a number of pathways to 5 pathways. We started off, if I remember right, I think there was 8, but the 5 pathways that we sort of consolidated to were recreational watercraft, anglers and the use of live bait, gear and equipment, and this is where most of the consolidation was, because gear and equipment on the pathways are hunters, divers, people that are working, researchers that are out taking sampling, people that live on shorelines, anybody that has gear and equipment and they're using it and it should be cleaned after and before it's used again in order to stop the spread. We kind of lumped all of that in together because they'd be taking similar behaviors, but on different kinds of equipment. And then we had the retail plant trade and the retail aquarium trade, which are known pathways as well. I'm going to talk more about live bait today, just because we only have a certain amount of time, and to go through all the pathways would take a long time. So there's be a bit of a focus on live bait, but it'll still explain the process that we went through. And I would say to you that this is a process that people should be using in order to identify the kinds of behaviors that they want to promote. So our first step was we conducted a very extensive literature review. And again, the literature review is available on that website, and we compiled a list of a lot of research, and we read it all, and we extracted the behaviors from that research out of it. And it's all there as a really good bibliography of the reports that we read through, the research we read through, and description of each of them. So if you're working on any of these pathways, that literature review is available on that Minnesota DNR website, and I would encourage you to go to it. It'll give you a jump off point to get into some really excellent research. From that, we developed this long list of potential behaviors, and then we convened a panel of experts and reviewed the long list and asked the panel to evaluate and prioritize the behaviors, all 150 plus behaviors. So how did they do that? Well, let me just show you. The first thing is, this is just a screenshot I took of the Excel sheet that we used in order to identify the potential behaviors. And so not all 150 are here, obviously. You'll see that the first one under pathway, they were sorted by pathway. So the first one on the list is actually the last one out of the list of sources under gear and equipment. And the last one on the list is the first of those under pets. But all the ones in between you'll see is live bait, live bait, live bait, live bait down that column, that pathway column. And those were all associated with behaviors that we came up with for live bait. For the different sectors, industry, you'll see in the second column, and anglers, and different sources, and different issues, and potential primary behaviors and potential secondary behaviors. So you don't have to read all of this. I just wanted to show you, here's an example of what that list of 150 behaviors looks like. And again, that's also available on that website. And so when we had that long list, we needed to evaluate it. So the second step was to take a look, to take that long list and evaluate it. I'm just going to blow up those three there under live bait that I've highlighted. And you can see that under those, it's live bait anglers, disposal of live worms and packaging on shorelines in water, live bait dumping of bait bucket water in or near body of water, live bait intentional release of live fish bait. So those are just three of them, and I just wanted to blow it up and to make sure that people could see it in case it was hard to see on your screens. So in order to evaluate it, we convened this list of, convened an expert panel. And the first thing we did was we asked them if there was anything we're missing, or are any of these behaviors that we're looking at, are they, should they be modified a bit? And we had 3 sessions because not everybody is available at the same time. But there were some additional behaviors that were added. For instance, I recall that one of them was we had used pressure water, use pressure water in order to clean the boat. And they said, let's split it between cold pressure water and hot pressure water. because those are two different activities with two different levels of effectiveness. We added pets because it was pointed out to us that research had shown that sometimes dogs are running through the water and they get invasive species and can move them. So we added to that list through those discussions where we had everybody on Zoom and had some really good discussion. So we updated the list, and then we asked them to go off by themselves. And so this was not on Zoom, but by themselves, so, to evaluate the behaviors. And we asked them to evaluate the impact that a behavior would take. So you can see the average impact shows up on the screen there. The average uptake, we asked them to, what's the uptake? I'm going to explain these terms in a bit. And the market potential. And then we averaged all of the input that they had. So here, this is the calculation that we use. So the priority or the product of the calculation is what's important. We take the impact that a behavior can have, the likelihood that people will uptake or undertake the behavior, so the uptake on the behavior, and the likely market potential that's available. So the impact is the impact that the behavior will have. So for instance, let's just, as an example, let's talk about trying to save lives by getting people to wear seatbelts. So the impact that the behavior will have, well, we know that seatbelts help save lives if there's an automobile accident. So that would rank really high. So you'd expect that on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is very low and five from that the experts would come back with. Likelihood of adoption is how likely is it that somebody is going to do it? And a lot of this might be convenience, but what happens is, or with seatbelts is, it's not very difficult to reach over, get that belt and just pull it across your body and buckle it. So the likelihood be very high. It might again be 4 out of 5, 4.5 out of 5. Now the market potential, most people wear their seatbelts. Now, it wasn't always true before laws were brought in, but now most people do, and it's, they don't even think about it. They get in their car and they put it on. So the market potential might be quite low because there's not a lot of people to convince to do it. And so that might only come in at 1 or 2 when evaluated, because most people are doing it. So you might end up saying, as much as seatbelt wearing saves lives, there's not a lot of point in spending a lot of money to promote it because most people are already doing it. There's not a lot to gain. So what we ask the expert panels to do is to take a look at that impact, uptake, and market potential and evaluate it for all 150 plus behaviors. And here's 3 examples. This is the numbers they came back with, so I'm going to show you the averages. But the first one, washing boats with high pressure. So they told us that the average was 3.9 out of 5, that obviously they felt that washing boats with high pressure water was, had a lot of impact. It would really help reduce the spread of invasive species. However, the uptake only came in at 2 out of 5, and that was mostly because they felt that the availability of high pressure water was low, that there weren't many places, not many boat launches would have high pressure water available there. And if somebody didn't do it at home, they might have a good intention, or sorry, do it at the boat launch when they're coming out because it wasn't available. They might have good intention to either stop at a car wash on the way home or get home and pull out their high pressure washer and clean the hull and remove invasive species. But when they get home, they're tired perhaps, and they don't do it. And then next thing you know, they're out launching their boat again and they haven't taken that step. So they felt the uptake was quite low. They felt that fewer people did do it than didn't do it, meaning that the market was there. Market potential was fairly high to get people on board that weren't doing it already. But because of the low uptake likelihood, it turned out that the numbers came in at 26.8. Now, let me just say quickly that if you multiply 3.9 times 2.0 times 3.4, it doesn't come out to 26.8. It's just, that's just because of rounding errors, because I'm only using one significant digit here. But the product is 26.8 for washing boats with high pressure. So quickly, disposing bait, very high impact. If people don't dump it into the water, but they dispose it properly, so it doesn't, the bait can't live in the water. Very high impact. They felt 4.0. They felt that it was very easy to do as long as it was disposal facilities, or even taking it home is pretty easy. So they felt the uptake would be fairly high at 3.7. And they felt that a lot of people weren't doing it that could be. So their number came in for the market potential as 3.4, which is fairly high. So the product became 51. So disposing of bait is a stronger, or is a more compelling behavior to promote than washing boats with high pressure. And removing visible debris from boats, the impact 4.4, very high. Uptake 4.2 because it's really easy to do. You walk around, remove what you see. So they felt that was pretty easy. However, in Minnesota, they felt that because Minnesota's had a very effective program running for years on clean, drain, and dispose, and have been promoting that activity, and have some strong, or some, some significant fines if you're caught driving down the road with a boat and trailer with invasive species on it, that the market potential was pretty low, that you already had quite a few people doing it. And when you multiply that out, it comes to 35.3. So to evaluate those three, you would say, okay, 51, disposing bait, that would be the most compelling one. If you're only going to do one, that would be more compelling than removing visible debris from boats, which in turn is more compelling than washing boats with high pressure. So they went through all 150 plus behaviors doing exactly this. And we sorted it by not only within each of those sectors, but overall to try and determine what we should go ahead with. So, and to that point, we finished the evaluation of the behaviors, and it was time to choose behaviors. So when we chose behaviors, we came up with 3 priority pathways. We combined retail plant trade and aquarium trade because we came to realize that they were pretty close to being the same. Very common issues, and even common players within those 2 trades. So organisms and trade, we kind of combined it together. And pond hobbyists and aquarium hobbyists and all of that in there. Equipment, particularly shoreline equipment. So that's people that perhaps are selling boat lifts or docks, or even water pumps that are in water that could have invasive species on them. We wanted them to, that's a very important pathway. And anglers with live bait was something that we pursued wanted to pursue as well. In order to pursue those behaviors, we needed to do some research, and we had to determine the barriers and motivators that are associated with the behaviors that we wanted people to undertake. So this is an important part of that gap that I described at the beginning of his presentation, is that when we talk to people about whether they will undertake a new behavior or not, we often find out what is preventing them from doing it now. And for those people who are doing it, we find out what motivates them. So we undertook 2 surveys. We surveyed anglers, and we surveyed people that lived on shorelines. And we had, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we had big samples, like 17 or 1800, I think it was, of each of those two groups. And we also had a roundtable discussion with representatives of the organisms and trade industry. So we had people from aquarium retailers, pond retailers, we had PJAC there, we had hobbyists, and we got them around a table, and we had a facilitated discussion with that group for an afternoon, and got a lot of information from them about the barriers to preventing invasive species, say, from being released from a pond into a body of water, what motivates people, what gaps in information, that kind of thing. For instance, so that group told us they really had to better understand what kind of materials they shouldn't be selling and that sort of thing. We want to figure out how to gauge the willingness of the target audience to modify behaviors. And importantly, and something that I always try and do, is to understand how best to communicate and engage these groups, how to reach them, because I quite often find that their preferred method of being reached is not necessarily the one that we've been using to reach them. So it's better to use their preferred method of reaching them in order to actually make a difference. So we did that kind of research, the 2 surveys and the roundtable discussions. And I just want to focus on barriers. I like to think of barriers as friction. Barriers make adoption of a new behavior difficult. So you've got a situation where people are doing one thing, you want them to stop doing that and do another thing instead. So you want, for instance, you want them to stop dumping their bait, live bait, into the lake before they go home. And you want them to dispose of it in a responsible manner, so there's no chance that that live bait is going to be established an invasive population. So if it's more difficult to do your new behavior, it's like somebody trying to push a fridge up a hill, and it's very difficult to do. So what you want to do is, at the very least, make the new behavior that you want them to do as easy as the current behavior. Because if it is, it can make the new behavior, it makes it easier for people to make that change. So if you're looking at somebody that can just dump that pail into the water by the dock before they pull the boat out, or they can just walk over and dump the fish into a disposal unit nearby, then at least you've made it just as easy. And if you can make it as even easier, then you're really getting, you're pushing downhill. It makes it a lot easier. So you're reducing that friction. This is so important in behavior change, is to make things convenient, reduce the friction, make it harder, increase the friction for the things you don't want them to do, like fines and that sort of thing provides friction, and make it easier for them to do the things you want them to do. So here's an example. This when we're looking at choosing the behaviors for anglers that use live bait, they told us in those surveys that they don't have access to on-site disposal amenities. Like we said, do you dispose of live bait in the water, or do you take it home, or do you dispose of it outside of the water? And what stops you from getting rid of it by disposing it in the garbage? And they often said they don't have access to on-site disposal amenities. So, and they didn't want to take it home. For those people who said that they did do it, they said they find it easier to dispose of live bait on a site than taking it home to dispose. So one of the strategies would be there then to remove that barrier would be to provide garbage containers or other disposal amenities at boat launches, landing areas, fishing piers, and access points. And also, because we don't want them, in Minnesota in particular, they're not allowed to transport the bait home in water from the lake because they'd be transporting lake water as well. So they are allowed to keep their bait. They can transport the bait, but not the water. So we can provide designated water drainage locations where they can dump that water out, fill their bucket with fresh water, and then put the bait back in and take it home. If they get pulled over and it's fresh water, they're okay. If it's lake water, they're in trouble. So this is, again, through that research, we found out how to reduce the friction and get those behaviors, make it easier for people. Other behaviors that we looked at for those people on shoreline residents to cleaning docks and lifts and dry for 21 days before moving the equipment. And in the for the organisms in trade, the behavior that we're looking at, it properly and safely dispose of unwanted aquatic species from aquariums and ponds. So again, I'm not going to get into those, but those are some of the ones. You'll find more information on that, on the reports that are listed on that webpage. So from that, we had some behaviors that Minnesota DNR wanted to do this year. I mean, there's a finite amount of money and finite amount of human resource capacity. So those ones that I talked about, those 3 behaviors, are those are ones that they decided they would pursue in 2020. It doesn't mean that they won't pursue the other ones later, but they decided those would be the 3 for 2020. Some might say, well, why didn't you do watercraft inspection? Well, the fact is, Minnesota has done watercraft inspection for a long time. They have a very good program that's been in place, and measurement has shown that it's been effective. So I think there's more bang for the buck in going for some of these other behaviors that they chose for this year. There's also been a whole bunch of research done on watercraft inspections already, so they're not lacking in research, although I think there may be an opportunity to refresh the research with more up-to-date information. But there's more than 20 years of information available in Minnesota. A lot of research done by Doug Jensen and others on watercraft inspections. So step 4 is building capacity. In Minnesota, Department of Natural Resources supports counties in aquatic invasive species programming, counties and other organizations. In the past, they offered community-based social marketing training done by Doug Mackenzie Moore, and they made that available not only to DNR staff, but also people in counties and organizations across Minnesota. In November of 2019, after we had done all of this evaluation, came up with these particular behaviors we wanted to pursue, we had a 2-day workshop on developing programs for priority areas that was attended by more than 60 people. And those people took the results of the research and all of that, the evaluation by the experts and the priority ranking and all of that stuff, and they worked in 10 different groups, and they worked on 10 different behaviors, and they worked on how they might implement it. You know, like we got them to come up with their own ideas and brainstorm, refine the ideas, and develop a program over 2 days on how they could theoretically deliver a program to foster those behaviors in their areas. So, and it wasn't just for the one area. In each of those groups, we had people mixed up, or mixed in from different parts of Minnesota. So we really challenged people not only to understand the process, but also to use their ingenuity and creativity in how to tackle the problem. It was an exciting couple of days, in my view. We had a lot of fun doing it, and they came up with some brilliant ideas. And from that, we wanted to get to the pilot test approaches. So for 2020, Minnesota DNR implemented a grant program. And what they did was they took some money that they had, and they made it available to counties and other organizations that would come forward and say, we will develop a program to foster behaviors according to these priority behaviors. This is what we would like to do. They applied, and as long as they met the criteria that were established, and, you know, that it was sound, that they were able to have their program reviewed by DNR staff, and I helped a bit with that. And we sort of, you know, improved it where we could and made suggestions and that sort of thing. And right now there are currently 11 approved programs being tested this year. Due to COVID, all the work won't be done this year. It will take next year as well for most of those programs. So there's a bit of an extension, but and evaluation is a key component of these pilots, as it always should. There always should be. Whenever you're doing these programs, you should implement pilots because you can learn a lot about, you know, how good your communications is, how good your approach is. It's a lot better to do it on a small scale first before spreading it out over a big, large area. Find out how to improve it, and then you can roll it out and scale it up after. So I just want to show you one of the pilot test approaches. And here is recently installed, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. Over to the right there is a bait disposal bin. And it says unwanted bait fish, dump it here. And I think this thing just looks fabulous.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that we are still seeing step 3. We're not seeing the graphic that you're describing.
Oh, well, that's not good. And I don't know why that would be.
There we go. Step 5, pilot test approach.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. And now we see presenter mode.
Yeah, just switching. I just tried to see if that would kickstart it.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much. This is fantastic.
Thank you for doing that. So step 5, so this is the bin. I'll go back. This is where it is. It's just right by the launch. So it's very convenient. People can go to that. There's a bin. It's got a lock on the front. They lift that handle and they can dispose of the material inside there. That sign that's up that's the sign. Unwanted bait fish, dump it here. I won't read the whole thing to you, but it says protect fish and fish habitat by disposing of unwanted bait in the trash. Over to the right, it says it's against the law to release bait in Minnesota lakes and streams, blah, blah, blah. And interestingly, on the bottom, it even tells people that if they're doing this, the minnows dumped in the bin will be turned into plant. The Eli Community Resource Community Garden is going to use it, compost it, and use it as fertilizer. So this is a program that the Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District is doing, and this is their pilot project. But there's 11 of these that are going on. And here's another sign that's a sticker rather that's on the front of it, hoping that people won't put those kinds of other materials in there that they shouldn't be putting in. But that's a nice, tidy program. Nice, tidy disposal facility, rather. When they maintain this thing and check on it and empty it and that sort of thing, they have a sheet of paper, and what they'll look for is if there's any contamination. If there's stuff that's not supposed to be in there, they'll mark it down. They'll do a visual inspection, or a visual assessment rather, of the volume. So if it's like a quarter full, half full, 3/4 or full, they'll mark that. And so there'll be evaluation that will help to assess whether the container is big enough, I guess, is one thing. And secondly, if it's if people are using it properly and that sort of thing, as well as getting an idea of the volume of material that they may have been able to divert from being dumped into the water. So that's it. I'm going to leave this up. As I said before, if you aim your phone at that, you should be able to be taken to the Minnesota website and Minnesota DNR website for the project. You know, you can find a lot of reports and information there. And with that, Elizabeth, I'd be happy to answer any questions people might have.
Okay, thank you, Ken. That was outstanding. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions. I have one from Tom Booz here. Who empties the bait bins and how nasty does it get?
Well, we don't know quite yet how nasty it's going to get, but it's going to be nasty, right? It's a rotting fish. The fact is, I mean, there's a big, that's when you're talking about friction, somebody can drop it off there, go home, and it's not going to be in their garbage at home. It's going to be in that in that container, and for that reason, they're more likely to dump it in there than to then take it home, which is keeps it, either way, that keeps it out of the water. Who's going to do it? The people that are running the pilot project are going to empty it.
Okay. A question from Mary Bauer. She says, I would think that disposing of live bait in the garbage would have a low acceptance because most people do not like the thought of living creatures, even worms, dying in the garbage. Is that something you came across as a barrier in your research?
Absolutely. This also with plants and animals in the aquarium and pond trade as well. Right? People that when we asked people what's preventing you of disposing of these properly, people said we don't want to kill it. I don't want to kill these things. You've got a pet, so that's something that has to be addressed in the communications and that sort of thing for this stuff. Even if it is, it's funny though, strange, I should say, that people are willing to take a big metal hook and pierce a minnow and put it down 30 feet into the water on the end of this, wiggling on the end of this hook. They don't want to throw it on a pile, but that is the case, and you have to address it.
Yeah, that is a little ironic. Another question, this one from Erica Edmonston. Do they have bear problems related to these bins?
That's what that's one thing I was wondering, Erica, is if that happens. Now, that bin is locked. Normally if there's bear issues around, any public disposal takes into account bear issues. So I know that, for instance, in Canada, if you have any garbage disposal at all in the province of Alberta, you're going to have bear safe receptacles. So it would depend on the area, I think, but it's certainly something that should be considered.
Yeah, I'm in Colorado, and we need those bear-proof trash receptacles. Okay, we had a couple questions on budget, and they kind of tie together even though they're from different folks. So the first question, how much funding did it take to implement this five-step process?
That's a good question. I don't recall exactly. I think Tina Fitzgerald is on the line, and I'm just wondering if Tina, if you could answer that. I think it was in the order of $68,000 or so for the research, but I don't remember exactly. Tina, do you have an idea?
And Tina, if you have that amount, if you could just throw it in the chat. I can't unmute you, unfortunately. So we would appreciate it if you would throw that in the chat and let us know. And then kind of a follow-up question to that is, with the inevitable budget reductions throughout state and federal governments, including departments of natural resources due to tax shortcuts from COVID, have you set up new lists, ones doable with fewer state employees and less grant money?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A project like this one that Minnesota DNR did, it was well funded. It's not that often that you have that much money available, that organizations have that money available, right? And what's good about the invasive, or one of the many things that's good about the invasive species group, I guess, or the population, is there's a lot of sharing that goes on. And that's why I think this Minnesota DNR website is such a great thing, because if for most people that are on here, if you're thinking of doing a literature review, go to that website and get that one from Minnesota, because it's already paid for and they're sharing it, So, but there's all kinds of different things. And when in my training, I try and promote doing as much as you can for available funds. So there's ways of doing surveying that costs a heck of a lot less than, the gold standard of random telephone dialing and all that stuff, which costs a fortune. So there are ways to do things less expensively, and the fact is that using information that's already available is one way, and secondly, I've seen places that have taken a look at what it might cost to do it gold standard, and then decided they're not going to do anything. You know, for the love of God, do something and do what you can for the resources that you have.
That's great advice. And I did, Tina was kind enough to put in the chat here, it was 90,000 for the first phase of research and 60,000 for the local grant pilot program. And all of that was funded through GLERI funds, which is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So Tina, thank you so much for providing that information. And yeah, folks, if you don't have that kind of money, start with what has already been done and go to that website and learn as much as you can. And then there was another question, kind of, are there less expensive options for bait disposal at shoreline? And I think you maybe already answered that, but I don't know if you want to extrapolate any further.
That particular one is fairly inexpensive. Now, that's a custom-made container, I believe, which is actually, just for interest's sake, kind of funny. Looks a lot like the cannabis disposal bins that we have at the airports in Canada if you're going to go to the States, because cannabis is legal in Canada now, but you don't want to be taking it into the States unless you want to go to jail. So they actually have containers that look quite a bit like that in the airports now when you drop it in. I think there's probably a chute and it goes down to the employee lunchroom or something. I don't know, but you know, the containers, it could be a compost bin. There's probably ways to do it cheaper. You know, I've seen in Minnesota the disposal for area for zebra mussels, which is really a three-sided container that's open and people can just dump it in there. So I think there'd be less expensive ways of doing that.
Great. With respect to the innovation uptake curve, I would expect individuals to have a tendency to specific parts of that curve. Which demographics was your program tailored to address? And do you know of strategies that can be tailored to target each of those demographics?
Yes. And when I do my training, I go through that. But I guess really quickly is, you know, I use the example for those early adopters and those and that early adapters. I often just jokingly say those are the kinds of people that line up 3 days before a new product out of from Apple, and they're sleeping outdoors to get. I always talk about the iToilet brush that has Wi-Fi, you know, that Apple comes up with. Those people are going to get on board right away. The next step is people are probably more, they need education. They may, you know, before I knew about invasive species, I'd spent a couple of decades working on habitat and waste management and energy reduction, all kinds of environmental programs. And then I realized, well, invasive species is very important as well. So for me, the education brought me along. And that would be sort of the second group. And then the commitment, we'll get those commitments, getting people to say that they will perform these behaviors. We'll get more people along that may have been less likely to do it. And then, as I said earlier, when you get the social norms established and there's peer pressure involved, there's outside pressure that might even get people that have no intention of doing it or might not even believe that it's important doing it because they just think that people will be looking down upon them if they don't.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting. Okay, another question from Tom Booz. Do you think this approach or assessment is easily applicable across the country?
Oh, I think it's across the planet. I think it is. Like, I mean, yeah. I mean, I spoke at the biosecurity conference or symposium in Australia last year, and they're doing the same sorts of things there to try and stop invasive species. And you know, as you know, they have a lot already, but they're also very susceptible to pathogens and that sort of thing in their food chain. So they're using these same kinds of approaches as well. And given that I do publish a newsletter that has readers internationally, like everybody is interested in this. So I believe it works everywhere. There's certainly that there are places where, you know, Minnesota, that Minnesota Nice slogan, the Minnesotans are very nice people. They're very community oriented. They may be more susceptible or more willing to do this because, and when we asked, they had a very strong environmental and community ethic. So they may be more likely than some other place might be to do this for the good of the community and good of the environment. But certainly the approaches, you may find that there's different barriers when you do your research in other parts of the country, but the approach is sound everywhere, I think.
And Ken, we've had a couple different questions about different user groups. So I would assume based on your last answer that this approach is suitable to other problems, not just bait or watercraft, but somebody mentioned illegal ATV use and staying on the trail and leave no trace, and other types of conservation related behavior change that could help invasive species programs.
Yeah, like I've been doing this since 1993. I mean, I'd done work in sustainability issues beforehand, but really on behavior change. And I've done water conservation, energy conservation, flood prevention, air and water quality, keeping phosphorus out of lakes and rivers, so nutrient management, you name it. Like it's just, and in fact, I've done it in health as well, so it isn't limited to particular areas. It's only limited to human behavior. This is dealing with the human dimension of any of these issues. And it's the application of human behavioral psychology to try and get people to adopt better sustainability behaviors.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I know you talked about donating blood and recycling and other types of things.
Sure.
So yeah. Okay, folks would love contact information for your newsletter. And then I'll give you one last question. So do you have a way that folks could sign up for your newsletter or, oh, there we go.
Yeah, if you go to the website, www.beyondattitude.com, if you haven't been there before, you'll get one of those annoying pop-ups that, and you can subscribe there.
Okay. There was a suggestion in the comments from Mary Bauer to think about utilizing seniors. A high percentage of retired seniors have disposable time to volunteer, and many of them are outdoor enthusiasts, and they can sit and make phone calls and do things like that. So just a suggestion to potentially reach out to some retirees to help with some of the expensive parts of doing that research in terms of making phone calls and things.
Right.
And then, okay, so we just have just one more minute left. I'm going to give you one more question, and then we'll let you out of the hot seat here. And this may not be a short question, but can you give just a quick summary of step 4 specifically and how to build capacity?
Oh yeah, sure. So in this case, what we did, the capacity that we're talking about is the capacity of knowing how to implement a behavior change program using behavioral psychology. So in this case, can you see that, Elizabeth, the step 4?
I see step 4, yes.
Yeah, okay. So in that particular case, we, over those 2 days, we spent half a day, I think it's 2.5 hours, of an overview of community-based social marketing or behavior change, and sort of a quick version of a full day training session that I would normally do. Many of the people that were there had already taken the training that DNR had provided the year before, or maybe 2 years before. But this is applied behavioral psychology. So if you wanted to learn more about applied behavioral psychology to build capacity in order to be able to deliver this, you could go to www.cbsm for community-based social marketing, cbsm.com. Maybe you could type it into the chat. So
Sure will.
www.cbsm.com is a good website. That's Doug Mackenzie Moore's website, and Doug coined the phrase community-based social marketing and built this model. He's a behavioral psychologist, and I've known him for almost 30 years. So that's a good place to start.
Great, thank you. I've been to that website and I've actually done some learning on there in the past, but I'm going to check that out again. Okay, so I did put that website in the chat, cbsm.com. All right, well that concludes our Q&A session today. So I want to thank everyone for submitting your comments and for participating today. Ken, this was an outstanding presentation and webinar. Thank you so very much for being here with us. A few reminders before I let you all go, just a couple of save the dates for you. Again, October 2nd at 10 a.m. Central is our Career Pathways for Invasive Species Management Membership First Friday that is open to students and temporary employees. Our annual conference starts with our general meeting on October 5th, and then we have conference and all of our committees on October 5th, conference the 6th, 7th, and 8th of October, and then our weed-free forage, gravel, and mulch workshop on October 9th. We have no monthly webinar on October 16th. We're skipping our monthly webinar in October because we have our conference, but we are doing a biocontrol summit on October 28th. So get information about that on our website. And then finally, please take our post-attendee survey. We would really love your feedback. And if you're getting continuing education credits, we need you to fill that out for us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us at NASMA. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks again, Ken, and everybody have a great day.
Take care.